Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for taking your seats, and we're about to start. We just have all our panelists here. My name is Matthew Newman. I work as a journalist at MLEX, and I'm going to hand the floor over immediately to the Ombudsman, Mrs. O'Reilly.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted that so many of you have come to this event this afternoon, and thank you indeed for that. Our thinking behind it was twofold. Obviously, we are being told in lots of countries, including my own native country, Ireland, that the crisis is not exactly over, but that we're coming out of it. A lot of people, citizens and I suppose businesses continue to be rather sceptical about that. And I suppose we're going to be exploring the truth behind that this afternoon and also looking to the prospects for 2014. As you know, 2014 is going to be a very interesting and exciting year politically with the parliamentary elections and then with a big battle looming over who will become the President of the European Commission. But I suspect, however, when either the current MEPs who want to come back or new candidates who are looking to come to Parliament go and knocking on the doors and talking to town hall meetings and so on, that the chatter will not be necessarily about who's going to become the next President of the Commission, but what about jobs? What about my children who are having to emigrate? What about my business? What is the European Union doing for us? Because I suppose, again, in many of the countries, including my own, the trade-off between the austerity packages that we've had to put up with has been that this will create a good economic base for the individual member state countries to go and to improve its business and therefore increase unemployment and therefore raise the general standard of living and well-being for all of the citizens. The second piece, which I'll be talking about towards the end of this event, will be the work of the European Ombudsman institution itself in relation to our role in business. Some of you may not be too familiar with that, and I suppose it's an opportunity for me and for the office to showcase what we do. I'm going to leave it to Matthew to introduce our guests in more detail. I'd like to thank them indeed for taking the time to come here this afternoon, because I know they are particularly busy. To my right, Marcus Ferber, MEP for the EPP, co-chair of the German CDU-CSU delegation, member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee, and he's going to look into what Europe can learn from Germany's business model. Then we also have Arnaldo Abruzzini, the Secretary General of Eurochambres, and he's going to share with us the results of recent survey they have done about the business climate within the EU in the year ahead. And we also have Mr. Luke Hendricks, who is the Director for Enterprise Policy and External Relations for something which I haven't quite learned to pronounce, UAPME, the European Association of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. A very, very important organisation because, as we know, so much employment is created not by the big multinationals that we're also familiar with, but mainly by the small and medium enterprises. Unfortunately, Silvana Rapti is unavailable. She's not able, unfortunately, to come with us this afternoon. She sends her apologies for that. And the entire afternoon is going to be moderated by the man you've just met, by Matthew Newman, Senior Correspondent for MLEX, a global news organisation specialising in competition policy and other economic and financial news. And from what I understand, it really is the go-to publication for everybody from interested parliamentarians to the Commission and business and so on. So thank you all for coming, and I hand over to you, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. O'Reilly. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's nice to see so many faces in the audience. I just want to remind people that this event is web streamed, and the hashtag is EO Business. So that's hashtag EO Business. If you've got your laptops, some of you do, or your mobile devices, you can tweet about the event. I'm going to give a brief overview of the subject, what we're here to talk about, and then I'm going to hand the floor over for two presentations, one from Mr. Hendricks and one from Mr. Abruzzini, and then we'll have a response from you. We'll have some questions, hopefully from the floor. I'll ask some questions to get things going as well, and then we'll have a response from Mr. Faber. So just to start out and put this, frame this debate, this seminar, we're talking about the business in Europe in 2014, beyond the crisis. So this is a question mark because right now we have a rather pivotal time in European political history. We have, as Mrs. O'Reilly just noted, elections this year, referendum in the UK. So lots of important things going on politically, but economically, we're also at a turning point. The economy, the recovery is really quite nascent. We have some signs that things are improving. And on January 30th, the European Commission reported that its economic sentiment indicator rose by 0.5 points in January. And this is the 9th consecutive increase in the economic sentiment. It was led by Germany, which retains the role as the locomotive for the European economy. And a few days after this survey, this report, we had more news out of Germany. The business confidence rose to its highest level since 2011. So this is suggesting that it's a strong start for 2014 for Germany. German exports are expected to revive this year as the world economy recovers. And economists expect that pent-up demand for investment in machinery and equipment will help boost growth this year. Business Europe, which represents 20 million companies, says that private investment is expected to grow by about 3% this year. So those are all good signs. We also have some positive news out of France, Italy, and Spain. All those economies have been struggling in the last couple of years, but there are signs that they're breaking out of recession. The renewed confidence is based in part because of the slackening in the euro crisis. This has sapped business confidence for several years. The Eurozone officially came out of the recession in the second quarter of last year, partly because of this and partly because of the efforts of the ECB to stabilize things a little bit more than a year ago. What was the result of the euro crisis? The businesses were afraid to invest and to take on more workers because of worries about the sovereign debt crisis that started in Greece and led to worries about the collapse of the single currency. And this is where I'd like to put this in perspective. Is the crisis, is the worst really behind us? Now, I see a lot of young faces out here in the audience. And I know that unemployment is a very, very big issue in the EU. It's 12% right now. The European Commission has estimated that it will remain about 12% into 2015. And that means that right now we have 26 million unemployed people in the EU. And let's put this also in perspective of youth unemployment, which is catastrophic in many countries. It's 24% EU-wide. This is the highest rate in the world. And they were 5.5 million young people unemployed in the EU. In Greece and Spain, the youth unemployment is even worse. In Greece, it's 59%, and in Spain, it's 54%. And so thousands of young people are leaving those countries to seek their fortunes elsewhere. And Greece itself is mired in its 6th year of recession. And if you look at their GDP, it's been reduced by a third since 2007. So the country remains under huge pressure to cut their debt and to implement economic reforms. Italy, which is Europe's 3rd largest economy, is slowly moving out of its recession, and it is predicted to grow about 1.1% this year. So where are we right now? We're 4 months ahead of the European elections, and many citizens are wondering where the recovery is. People who don't have a job are wondering how they're going to find a job, and people with jobs are also frustrated that there's been wage stagnation. There are calls in several countries to have an increase in the minimum wage. Maybe we could hear a bit more from that from Mr. Farber. We have big problems with the credit crunch. It's more than 5 years since Lehman Brothers collapsed, which caused a freeze in lending. And however, small and medium-sized businesses are still suffering from a lack of credit and access to capital. So the credit crunch is still alive and well for companies. So here I've tried to frame the debate a little bit, putting things that there's the glass half full or half empty. There are signs of recovery, and I'd like to go a little bit more in detail, first with the representative of Eurochambres. We're going to hear in detail about from Mr. Ambrosi, a recent survey on business optimism, and then we'll move on to Mr. Hendricks, who will talk about UAPME and small and medium-sized enterprises and the challenges for Europe. So first, I'll give the floor to Mr. Ambrosi.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak a little bit on what is the Eurochambres perspective on the economy of this year and the incoming years. It is a pleasure, really, to share some of the thoughts that we have elaborated in the past months with you, because I think from your introduction, I think that we should pay a lot of attention on the wording that we are using, because some of the words might be, hiding different meanings behind, depending on the perspective that we are looking at. So your question has been very clear. Are we out of the crisis? Some good signs. Yes, some good signs if we believe statistics are right. So statistically wise, we produce since 25 years a study which is called the Eurochambres Economic Survey, in which we ask individual entrepreneurs about their perspective on the incoming years on a certain number of economic indicators. Now, the sample is very wide, very large, because we are talking on a number between 55 and 90,000 businesses that are surveyed in order to catch a picture on what we expect or what they expect for the incoming years. Now, what you see on screen, yes, it is an interactive map. Actually, that map, you can access that map through our website or through just Googling Eurochambres Economic Survey, ES on Google, you will find it, where we had tried to give a visual perspective on the recovery. Because still, statistically wise, overall, Europe seems to be heading for an economic situation which is much better than the previous one. So we might be tempted to say, yes, we are out of the crisis. But because Europe is made of 28 member states, and those 28 member states are not very much integrated among themselves, if we look at the map, we will immediately see for the first of the indicators, which is the business confidence, that we have a picture which shows colors where the darkest colors are the most positive and the lightest colors are the less optimistic countries. So as you can see immediately, there is a sort of, I don't know if you can see the colors actually. There is just one single color. What is this? Well, so, but believe me, there is a difference in those colors, where we can see that the southern or eastern southern part of Europe is much less optimistic than the central and north part of Europe. In terms of business confidence, why business confidence is so important? Because for many that have made their studies in economy, you might remember that in the books, the expectations are the basic ingredient for entrepreneurs and investors to make their business. If expectations are dark, no one will dare to invest or to put energy and money in their own business. Expectations, positive expectations, it means that businessmen are willing to see their business growing, to invest their money in the business. So the business confidence is the indicator number one for those that want to see how economy will be, because economy by large, even though there is a large share of the public sector intervention in economy, but private business by large represent the European business model. Being positive doesn't necessarily mean that we will match positive expectations in other indicators. Mark, you have just mentioned employment. Well, if I go on the employment indicator, we see that the picture is, again, absolutely different. The light green, it means that those that believe that they will employ additional people are less numerous of those that believe that they will not employ additional people, or maybe they will reduce their workforce. And if you see on the picture, you see again that there is a sort of north-south divide, where even the large southern European countries, on employment terms, they do not see any better for this year, and so forth. And the figures that have been recently released just confirm that this is the expectations. So even if we might conclude that at European level we are out of the crisis, we cannot conclude that from the individual perspective of the European employees or potential employees there will be any better specifically in a large portion of Europe, which is the southern portion of Europe. And this does not give any better result if we go on another very important indicator, which is investment. If I'm confident in the future as an entrepreneur, I might be willing to put my money at work, so I will invest in my business. If I'm reticent in investing money in my business, it means that I want to sit and see what will happen. But if the entrepreneurs at large wait and see for what will happen, economy does not move, because economy does not move by itself. So also the employment indicator, the investment indicator, appears quite gloomy. Only few countries have a dark purple, or whatever color is that. Many are very light. It means that investment will not grow necessarily. It is true that this is still statistics, and I'm very careful when we have statistics on European indicators and so forth, because sectorial-wise we might see a totally different picture, or even regional-wise in the same countries there might be huge differences. So just take these indicators for what they are, a picture with some, not very precise borders. there is one element that I want to underline, because we ask also to those businessmen that we survey, what would you need to be more optimistic or to change your perspective? Well, I can tell you, just to make it short for this first round, the major blame the businessmen see in the current situation is related to the public sector lack of efficiency, let's put it this way. When I say lack of efficiency, I refer specifically to the administrative burdens, compliance cost, of inefficiency of the procedures, length of the procedures, and so forth, so forth. Meaning that from the private sector perspective, what will help very much a strong improvement in the business confidence and therefore in all the others will be that the public sector will put their fingers out of the economy as much as is possible. This is something which is shared in many countries. We have slightly different perceptions, of course, but the idea that transparency, efficiency, capacity to be up with the recent development in managing organizations and governments should be put in place in many countries in Europe. It is a very common sense among the surveyed entrepreneurs. And I make the reference specifically because the messages are very specific on three elements. For instance, e-signature. We know that this is a dossier that even in this House, at the European Parliament, has been discussing since a long time. Now, while the European Commission or European institutions are preaching member states to introduce e-identity, e-invoicing, e-signatures in their transaction, just imagine that even the European Commission itself does not use it, or very marginally. We as an organization, we work very much also in co-finance projects with the European Commission, and in certain cases we are asked to sign from 10 or 12 different countries' organizations 3 copies of documents to be handed over in Brussels. That has an associated cost for the economy which is huge, as we have counted hundreds and hundreds of millions of euros. A second element, which is very close to the host of this conference activity, is mediation. Now, while we all know that, especially in the southern European countries, the court's efficiency is something which is desirable but not really there, there is a very strong push to include the alternative dispute resolution mechanism in the business society, in contracts and so forth. Well, again, the European institutions and specifically the European Commission, which has been so fast in agreeing that ADR mechanism should be introduced in member states level, well, you wouldn't believe that, but in no contracts signed with the European Commission, there is a mediation clause already there. So how much those institutions can be credible if they preach but do not practice what they preach? Last element is the late payment. This is another very important dossier that has been handled within the European institutions. But while now, after almost a year of the deadline for the transposition, member states have transposed the late payment directive, which is a direct cost for the private sector, specifically regarding the payment from the public administration to the public sector, there is no sign of a better way public administration is paying the new contracts. A lot of focus has been on the stock of the unpaid invoices. But signs from member states that in the new invoices for delivery and purchases that public administration has made on the private sector in recent months do not show any better in terms of delay of payment. And that has another associated cost which is very strong. But the European Commission that has promised zero tolerance on member states, maybe behind closed doors they do something. But certainly in public I do not see any sign of zero tolerance. So if I conclude, I would say that overall in Europe the indicators of the economic survey show figures that are by far the best since 7 years. But that does not necessarily mean that we are out of the crisis and that the private sector is able to bring the European economy out of the crisis without a strong and clear, decisive support made by the institutions, both at European and national level. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambrosini. We're going to hear now from Mr. Hendricks. He's speaking from EURAPME, which is the European Association of Craft, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. And then we'll have some time for some questions from the audience. So I give the floor to Mr. Hendricks.
Thank you, Matthew. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the European Ombudsman to inviting WAPME here today, and I hope that my voice will keep it because I have a terrible cold. Regarding your question, is the worst behind us? I really don't know. There are indeed some indications that the crisis is over, and I believe the data that Mr. Abruzzini gave, although I'm colorblind, so I couldn't see the colors neither. But in any case, what we see amongst our entrepreneurs is that there is still a lack of confidence, and in principle, entrepreneurs, they are quite optimistic. Normally they are complaining, but they are optimistic because otherwise they should stop their business. And in any case, there is still a problem for them to have access to finance. Another issue is that in any case, if there is recovery, this has to come from the private sector because in any case, the tight budgets of the member states do not allow for any stimulants towards the economy. It was already in the past like this, small and medium-sized enterprises, probably you know it, but it's worth reminding it, they represent 99.8% of all enterprises in Europe. They provide 3/4 of employment, 60% of turnover, and 85% of new employment in Europe. So in any case, if we have to count on a sector or on enterprises, then it is on the small and medium-sized enterprises. But what are now the main challenges for small and medium-sized enterprises also in the coming years? In fact, I'm not going to tell you anything new because the challenges that SMEs face today are the challenges that the SMEs faced yesterday and the day before and 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So I'm always a little bit surprised when this topic is debated in a panel that there are so many people coming to listen to maybe the same annoying messages, what the expectations and the challenges of SMEs are, but it's our job to do so, and we have to keep continuing to bring this message. First of all, one of the biggest problems for SMEs in general and still today is access to finance. And there we have to ensure that the banking regulations should merely incentivize lending to SMEs, and they should not create any barriers to locally active banks. In any case, we also need more guarantees for loans, mezzanine instruments, and also securitizations, because these are the most efficient ways for public support for SME finance. And there I would also like to mention what already Mr. Abruzzini mentioned, the issue of the late payment. This is since many years on the agenda of small and medium-sized enterprises, and WAPME has achieved here in the Parliament to have a directive which is not perfect, but in any case goes in the right direction, and now also foresee something concerning B2B, because it are not only the public authorities who are not paying on time, and I would like to remind you that already in 2008, at the Council meeting of November 2008, all the member states promised to pay their invoices in 30 days. Now we are 5-6 years later, and the situation has nearly improved. In some member states it's going better, but public authorities remain to be bad payers, and also enterprises remain to be bad payers, and especially bigger ones towards small and medium-sized enterprises. Although it's not allowed anymore to impose long payment terms, we still see that terms of 100, 150 and 200 days are still asked towards small and medium-sized enterprises. So this is quite surprising, and in fact it are the small and medium-sized enterprises who are financing the big ones. Another key challenge is for small and medium-sized enterprises is access to research and to new technologies. New technologies, they are essential for small and medium-sized enterprises in order to exploit their potential. Because small and medium-sized enterprises innovate. Maybe it's not well known, but in any case the applied innovation is very common. Because it are the small and medium-sized enterprises who bring innovative products towards the consumers. It are small and medium-sized enterprises who bring through services, also innovative services towards the consumers and other businesses. And there an important issue is standardization. And there we have a lot of support of the European Commission, because recently we created a new organization, SBS, Small Business Standards, which help small and medium-sized enterprises to be active in the field of standardization and to be also be able to contribute to the standardization process, because standardization is quite important for SMEs or for enterprises in general to have access to markets, and before they were merely dominated by the standards of the biggest ones. Another issue is access to qualified workforce. And there we need also more continuous training and also adequate lifelong learning. Because these are also the key advantages for small and medium-sized enterprises, that is our qualified workforce. But also there we have to look to the future, and we have to ensure that there is enough training for new technologies and for ICT. There are a lot of challenges. For example, access to the cloud. Also there, the European Commission has understood the importance of having access to the cloud, and it's in fact worrying that Europe is also here lagging behind Asia and North America in accessing the cloud. This is quite important because this can it can give important reductions of costs for small and medium-sized enterprises, be it in the field of software or of storing their data. On the other hand, SMEs are in some countries lagging behind. Recently, I saw data from France where only 51% of the smallest enterprises has no connection to internet, and this in the year 2014. So there is still a lot to do, not only for the business organizations, but also for the public authorities. And then another important issue, and also Mr. Abruzzini mentioned it already, and this is more important for SMEs than for the big enterprises, is that SMEs depend on the availability of high-quality public services. So, in any case, from network industry, for example, energy, education and qualification system, but also public and social administration. So there it's extremely important that we can deal with responsive public authorities which are efficient and also have competitive cost and prices. And there the issue of the delivery of licenses is quite important for the smallest enterprises. Small and medium-sized enterprises, there are more than 20 million, they are quite heterogeneous, and this also should be taken into account because they have different needs, and this is also the difference with the big ones. In fact, the big industry or big enterprises, they have all a little bit the same problems, but the 20 million enterprises, they have different needs. And as we have here a representative of the Parliament, I think that there is a clear opposition between what entrepreneurs think and what politicians think and do. Because entrepreneurs, in fact, they are used to take decisions in a very fast way. And they have also to execute their decisions in a very fast and quickly way. Because they are aware that this brings risk with them, but they are ready to take this risk. And if they wait too long, then maybe the opportunity is gone, and this can even lead to the death of the enterprise. While public authorities or politicians, they do often exactly the opposite. They try to exclude every risk or they try to avoid every failure, and of course this is their right, but the result of this is that there are very often complex procedures and regulations and also a very slow decision-making process. I mean, it's not the aim of this conference today to bring those two positions together, because I think this is also impossible, but it would already be a step in the good directions if both entrepreneurs and politicians could understand each other's position, also in view of the upcoming elections. And then especially it's quite important that the public authorities and the politicians really understand the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises, and this is then my last point, concerning the regulatory environment. Because until today, the regulatory environment has never been adapted to the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises. It was always conceived from the point of view of big organizations and big enterprises. And since the Small Business Act, we have finally, at European level, a text which should ensure the application of the Think Small First principle, which means that legislation should be drafted, conceived, taking into account the possibilities and the point of view of the smallest enterprises, because we or the small enterprises, they are the majority, they are not the exemption. So in principle concerning new legislation, we are against exemption for small and medium-sized enterprises, as we are not the exemption but the rule. So legislation adapted to the needs of small and medium-sized enterprises, which also implies better consultation of the representative business organizations, but also better and neutral objective impact assessments, especially with a SME test, and that also the programs and the services towards small and medium-sized enterprises should take into account the specificities of small and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our two speakers. It was very interesting to hear different perspectives on where things can be improved, and it looks like there's a lot of blame being handed out to public authorities and to the EU institutions. Unfortunately, we don't have someone from the Commission, but we do have someone from the Parliament here. We'll hear from him in a little bit. But first I wanted to open up to you, the audience. If you have any questions so far on the first two presentations, and if we just remind you to press the buttons, because it is live stream, so we can hear your questions. So do I have any questions right over there?
Thank you very much. I come from Uniropa, so we're a trade union federation representing service workers, including the finance sector. And first of all, I would like to thank the European Ombudsman for the great support that we got in securing representation of smaller actors in the European supervisory authorities. It was very much appreciated, and we look forward to further cooperation there. And then I would, Mr. Hendricks, on what you said about access to finance for SMEs. For small actors, we've seen a few proposals coming out from the Commission on looking at funding from securing funding for smaller actors from different sources, such as crowdfunding, etc. In relation to funding coming from the the banking industry, and ensuring that the small actors have the access to funding, and look whether it should be from the already regulated market or from new sources. And I would just like to see if you have any further thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not an expert in access to finance, but what I can tell you is that concerning crowdfunding, it's an alternative way of financing, and I think that as at the moment the traditional ways of access to finance are still not working perfectly, that we have to take any opportunity to have access to finance. It's not the ideal one, but we have to use all opportunities, and especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. If you lack access to finance and there is the possibility to use crowdfunding, then we should use it. But of course it's up to the entrepreneur himself to use this.
Excellent. Any other questions on either banking, finance? I just have if I don't see any hands, I have a question for the first two speakers. We heard a lot about confidence from Mr. Ambrosini. How could confidence be restored? And I'm thinking in particular about banking union. We had a deal at the end of 2013 by the member states, and this is about banking resolution. And the idea behind that is to have a backstop, so we don't have this negative spiral where the problems of the banking sector would go into the public sector, so the sovereign sector. And if we have more confidence that there's enough backstop so banks will not fail, there could be an increase in lending. So just wondering what the priorities from his point of view on how to improve this kind of confidence would be the answer to get some of this pending legislation through.
I would like to give you an answer with an example, or better, a paradox. The bank resolution, the banking union, how much are those instruments that will favor banks and government instead of individual businesses or citizens? It is true that at the end of the day also the businesses and citizens will benefit of it. But just to make a comparison, all this structure, it seems to me to be a sort of guarantee instrument for government and banks that they will continue to make their business as usual. But while government have been somehow good in establishing that framework, when we come to a framework of guarantee for individual businesses, and that was the reference that Luke Hendricks was making before, only few member states have agreed to put in place money to fund an instrument that will provide guarantee for the small businesses. So they have been very good in putting in place a framework to guarantee themselves, because therefore the failure of banks and large banks will not impact in sovereign finance. But they are not being so good in putting in place money to create a guarantee framework for individual businesses. Now, I think that there is the answer to the confidence question that you have asked. How could we be confident if we do not see a major willingness to do what everybody preaches to do? We should support small business. We should restore confidence. We should get the economy back on rail. But then decisions are not necessarily consistent. So confidence comes because you believe that there is something that will happen. Well, I'm still among those that are not totally convinced that this is the spirit of our legislators, both at European and national level. I'm not blaming one or the other one. That level must convince us that they really have in mind what they preach. And the examples that Luca just made, the think small principle, despite the fact that 98% of businesses are small businesses in Europe, despite the fact that we are the large providers of employment through the small business environment, of GDP, of innovation, despite all this, we had released a study on the impact assessment that theoretically, compulsorily, the European institutions, the European Commission for the time being, is obliged to produce every time that a proposal of a new legislation is going to be put in place. Well, only in few cases the impact assessment related to the SMEs has been completed. Now, how could we restore confidence? So this is why I'm saying confidence should be restored, not because the market and not the market, because if we continue to drive Europe in a way that is incomprehensible for the private sector, confidence will not be there.
Okay, some strong words about the Commission and impact assessments. We're now going to have a response from our last two panelists. First we have Mr. Markus Ferber. He's a German politician. He's a member of the European People's Party. He most recently was made a head of list for the CSU. I can congratulate him for that. And he was going to be speaking about Germany and whether or not Germany is the successful business model. So, Mr. Ferber.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew, dear Ms. Ombudsman. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, it's a great honor for me being here and having the chance to speak. And also I've been asked to speak about what can Europe learn from Germany. I'm only from Bavaria, but hopefully I can deliver some thoughts on Germany as well. But beside that, I try to give some responses, as a lot of things have mentioned where a politician who deals for the res publica, for the public issue, wants to respond because I think it's really a difference whether you work for an SME, which I did before I became member of the European Parliament, or you are working for the res publica. And there is a difference, because if we do something wrong, not only one company has a problem, and that has to be taken into account to give a first general remark. But I think that is very important to have a conference like that today, as it is touching a very important issue. And compared to what we have experienced in the past few years, the economic prospects for 2014 are bright, and that should be taken into account as we are in February, and we want to see a bright outlook for the coming year. The economy of the Eurozone and the European Union as a whole are likely to grow, and some member states are witnessing strong recoveries, and I think that is the main message for 2014. While the overall prospects for the European economy are quite promising, it is not true for all member states, and we saw it already in the first slides. In some member states, growth will remain anemic. Furthermore, in all those countries, output is still below their pre-crisis peak 5 to 6 years ago. And I think that is the main difference to Germany, where we have already overcome the results on the pre-crisis area. So there is quite some disparity among European economies. While some have experienced a healthy recovery, others still struggle to catch up with where they were before the crisis. So it is more than reasonable to ask why some countries have done better than others. And to be honest, in this context, I have been asked to share some thoughts about the German model, which has done quite well during the last years. And I do think that there is something to learn from the German case study. But when we look back a little more than 10 years ago, Germany was considered, and that is what I tried to express by this picture, the sick man of Europe. We had growth in the world, we had growth in Europe, but no growth in Germany. That is 12 years ago. So Germany was the sick man of Europe. GDP growth was close to zero, unemployment in double digits. Today, things look considerably brighter. The number of people being in full-time employment is at an all-time high. The economy is expected to grow by 2%, and output is way above the pre-crisis peak. The British newspaper The Economist summed the situation up quite neatly by stating that Germany has become Europe's engine, or you spoke about locomotive. But how did it happen? Well, I think the success of this model is due to a set of tough reforms on the one hand and some structural reasons on the other. Let us start with the reform side. In the early 2000s, it became apparent that Germany's economy was gradually losing competitiveness. Labour costs were quite high, the labour market too rigid, and the economy as a whole was sluggish. Hence, the need for reform was as obvious as an elephant in the room. And luckily, a broad coalition formed among all major parties to address the problem at hand. So it was a coalition of socialists and the Greens, but the reforms have been adopted by an overwhelming grand coalition, and that meant that all reforms done in the early 2000s stayed and have been further developed after change of governments, which we have 2 times since that. Key elements of the reform package called Agenda 2010 were limitations in dismissal protection, cuts in long-term unemployment benefits, a shift of social security contributions toward employees, and investment in childcare facilities and education. To be very blunt, those measures were widely unpopular, and at first things got worse before they got better. However, after some time, improvements were quite obvious. A more dynamic labour market led to more competition, preventing real wages from rising and thus improving competitiveness. A good indicator for that is the development of unit labour costs, a measure of productivity and actual labour costs, and that is what I tried to bring in comparison by various member states. And these slides are very often used by ECB as well. though I think it's very easy to understand one of the problems. To give you some more explanations, not only about the reforms we did, I think what is on main importance in Germany is vocational education. Since the last 90s, on European level, there's a kind of benchmark process indicating which member states do well, which do worse in bringing young people in jobs. And since that, we have the experience that the German model of vocational education is one of the successful stories in avoiding youth unemployment. This set of reforms made the German labour market more dynamic, but the best proof, I think, is education. To prove this point, let's have a look at some numbers. I hope I'm still in the right slide, yes. The first thing that is striking is that German youth unemployment is far lower than for many other European countries. This figure alone tells us that the German system of vocational education is getting some things right when it comes to getting young people into jobs. With the supply of labour so low, it is not hard to imagine that a quarter of German business struggle to find people with the right skills. So for the moment, the constituency I have the honour to represent here, for every open post for vocational training, 1.5 posts are available for one person. So not everyone does get its dream job, but for the moment we are asking for young people to come from all over Germany and all over Europe, as we really need these young people for the further development of our economy. Now, if we have looked to countries like Greece, Spain, Italy and Portugal, here we have a youth unemployment above 50% and sometimes even more than 50%. Given that vast pool of surplus labour, companies should not have any problems finding suitable candidates for their vacancies. So that is how we are trying to solve the problems now. But to be honest, it's not only the question to bring young people then to Germany, but as well to educate more than we need to send them back and give them a kind of startup for building up new companies. Apparently, schools and higher education institutions do not teach their students the skills they need to succeed in the labour market, and therefore vocational training is one of the success stories. And to be very honest, this is one of the reasons why German MEPs always become angry when the European Commission launches another attempt to interfere in the German model of vocational education or to break up the system of regulated professions, because that is the founding of SMEs. That will be my next topic, as that is one of those secrets of German success story as well. And that is what we call the German Mittelstand. Yeah, that is SME in Germany, Mittelstand. Another issue directly interlinked with the system of vocational education is the structure of German economy, consisting of a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, as we call them, Mittelstand. Those small and medium-sized enterprises are usually very specialized in what they do and often dominate their particular niche in the world market. So we have a lot of so-called hidden champions, SMEs with 100, 150, 200 people, but in this sector they are producing something. They are number one in the world. So I worked for according to our opinion, SME, 450 employees. I know for Europeans it's a large company, and we've been world market leader for a special area, and that is what you will find very often in Germany. This structure of German economy has been grown over the years and is arguably not easy to imitate. But vocational training and this question of founding companies, Mittelstand companies, SMEs, is one of the success stories in Germany. First of all, that means to make it easy to get a business started. There are a couple of seemingly trivial questions regarding that matter. How long does it take to register your business? Was one of the big problems in Germany. Yeah, because you need to have an address and you get a tax number, but you don't get a tax number the other way around. You don't get an address if you have no tax number, so you are lost. And to overcome these problems is a way of reforming as well. How easy it is to get all the documents you need. Is it possible to get financing at decent rates? What about the protection of property rights and the enforcement of contracts? I think that are those main questions, and we did a lot in improving our system on that areas as well. Looking at the World Bank's annual Doing Business Index, one can see that European countries perform quite differently on those issues. On the overall ease of doing business index, Germany is 21st, Spain 52nd, Italy 65th, Greece 72nd of 189 countries. So even for Germany there is space for improvement. So arguably there is quite some catch-up potential for some member states of the European Union. And of course, there are some things we can do on European level, namely getting regulation smart and SME friendly. And I can only agree on that, what has been said already. In 2008, the European Commission passed the so-called Small Business Act. The Small Business Act was basically a commitment to think small first and to take special account of the needs and limitations of SMEs when drafting new regulations. And without any doubt, this is a sensible idea. However, I feel, and I can agree with what has been said, that the European Commission more often than not does not live up to that idea properly and tries to engage in a sort of micromanagement that can only harm SMEs. Luckily, there is a European Parliament ready to correct the Commission's shortcomings where necessary and to add where majorities are available. To conclude, so what can we learn from the German experience of the past couple of years? As I pointed out, there are three main lessons to learn. First of all, ambitious supply-side reforms can make a difference. Usually, they take some time to take effect and may be painful. And that was one of the successes we had that was not planned. It was not planned to have a crisis in 2008 onwards. But as the reform started in 2003, or have been developed in 2003, started 2004, you have this delay time of 3 years. That was during a growing area, but then during the financial crisis and the economic crisis, all these reforms are fully functioning, and so we overcome the crisis better than others. Second, the German system of vocational education is quite good at teaching people the right skills for the job market. I think it could be a model for other countries as well. Not as complicated as Germany does it. So I'm an electrical engineer by profession, and for electrical as a whole we have more than 12 different educations. But so no, not everyone has to take that on board. But I think it is a kind of blueprint how to overcome especially the high rate of youth unemployment. And thirdly, SMEs are the backbone of the economy. Hence, regulation needs to take account of that, and legislators need to avoid red tape and unnecessary micromanagement. More simply, doing business must be easy. I think that could be the headline. So I'm pretty sure that if the countries with their economies in trouble pick up those ideas, in the mid to long run, they will get back onto the right track. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting overview of what Germany's been up to for the last 10 or 12 years, leading the call for reform and making a big difference. I'm going to pass the floor over to Emily O'Reilly, but just a first introduction to the Ombudsman. She became Ombudsman last July. She was previously the National Ombudsman of Ireland from 2003 to 2013. In 2007, she became Ireland's first Commissioner for Environmental Information. She began her career as a journalist, something I can respect greatly. She worked for several national newspapers in Ireland. In 1998, she became the editor of McGill magazine. She's the author of 3 books, including one about an Irish journalist who was murdered by a drug gang. I give the floor over to Emily O'Reilly.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew, for that introduction. What I want to do is just to explore a little bit what my office, the institution of the European Ombudsman, can do on behalf of business. I would imagine not many of you have necessarily made the connection between the Ombudsman and business, but in fact we deal with businesses on quite a regular basis, small, medium and large, because of course they do have significant interaction with the Commission and indeed with other agencies, and if they have a problem, it's no different than a citizen having a problem with an institution. We deal with that on the same basis. So I'd like to just first of all briefly outline what we do. We investigate complaints about poor and failed administration in the EU institutions. In other words, if an individual or a company, an NGO, feels that they haven't been treated fairly, and I don't mean just legally, because maladministration covers a lot more than just the strict letter of the law, then they can come to my office. We'll take a look at it and make a recommendation depending on what the outcome of our investigation is. Naturally, we receive most complaints about the European Commission because it's the big beast in the jungle, and most people have the greatest interaction with the European Commission given the power and the reach that it has. We don't investigate complaints about national, regional or local administrations or private businesses. We do get a lot of complaints about them, obviously, but we always try to be helpful, and so we would send them to the appropriate authority, whether that would be the National Ombudsman or another institution or whatever. We always try and help. The European Ombudsman also coordinates the European network of member state ombudsmen. The advantages of it, lots of people when they come to the Ombudsman looking for assistance arguably could also go to the court. The advantages to coming to us are we do have extensive powers of investigation, as indeed the courts have. We have a right to see all the records that are necessary for the pursuit of the investigation, and we also have the capacity to ask anybody who might be able to help us in our investigation to come and talk to us or give evidence to us. It is a soft power. I frequently say I'm not a judge. I can't bang the gavel on the table and insist that people do what I say. The decisions are not binding, but roughly 83% of the decisions, recommendations, proposed what we call friendly solutions, are in fact accepted by the relevant institution or agency. In the event that a recommendation isn't accepted by an institution, then I have the power to make a special report to the Parliament, and I seek the support of the Parliament to help me get the recommendation across the line, assuming that the Parliament of course agrees with my analysis. The relationship between the Ombudsman and the Parliament, I think, is fundamental to the good working of the institution. I think it's always very important that there be good relations between the Parliament and the Ombudsman, because ultimately we're all working for the same reason, to help and support the citizens and the residents of the Member States. I can initiate own initiative investigations, and this is a very useful tool in my armoury, so I don't have to act necessarily on a complaint, but if I see a pattern of complaints arising, or if I see by scanning the horizon that there is an issue that could be usefully investigated by my office, then I can initiate an own initiative investigation. Sometimes NGOs, sometimes businesses, people with an interest in a particular topic would come to my office and suggest where the powers of my office could usefully be used. Critically, and this differs from what would happen with a Member State Ombudsman or many of them, the complainant does not have to be personally affected by the actual alleged piece of maladministration or poor behaviour on the part of the institution. And what this means is that it allows organisations, institutions, NGOs, for example, or indeed businesses or lobbyists, whatever, to to come to me if they feel that there is a systemic issue that is causing problems for people generally as opposed to one individual. I also can organise public consultations. For example, when I did an investigation into Frontex, this was started by my predecessor over the last couple of years, into Frontex, which is, as you know, the agency which coordinates the protection, security of the EU's external borders. When my predecessor initiated an investigation into how they were abiding by their human rights obligations under the Charter for Fundamental Rights, the office engaged in public consultation in relation to that, which was very useful and very successful. The other great joy of my office, as opposed to the courts, is that it is entirely free of charge. These are some of the problems faced by businesses, which have already been alluded to by some of the earlier speakers. There can be problems with EU-funded projects or programmes in other countries. Late payments, which I've heard is a very big issue, continues to be. I was aware of that even before I took up office from reading my predecessor's reports. It is something that we monitor on a continual basis. Relatively recently we got the latest report from the Commission. There are improvements, but they're not very large. You're agreeing with me? So I think this is something that I need to look into a little bit closer. And I think it's particularly important at times of recession when the economy isn't doing well, because it's more important than ever, particularly for small businesses who can in fact go out of business if payments are withheld for a long time for whatever reason. And I think that is something that, thanks to again listening to you this afternoon, that I will take another look at. Contractual disputes, problems with calls for tender, lack of transparency, a very familiar one, refusal of access to documents, typically somebody who may have been denied a particular contract or who suspects that the reasons that a competitor got it may not have been justifiable. They may be looking for records to see whether their suspicions are well-founded or not. Problems with antitrust investigations, procedural errors, unnecessary delays, violations of fundamental rights. So that's a sort of a tapestry of the sort of problems that we deal with, not just with businesses, but obviously you can see how they can connect with the problems that many businesses deal with. Statistics, about 2,500 people contact us every year. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, many of those complaints may not be within my own remit, but we always try and help, and we always send them, obviously with the complainant's agreement, to somebody else. That could be a national ombudsman. When I was National Ombudsman of Ireland, frequently I would have got communication from the European Ombudsman, who would be sending me back a complaint that I could hopefully handle. We open about just under 500 investigations every year, about 30 from businesses, most complaints from those particular countries, Spain, Germany, Poland and Belgium. As I said, the compliance rate at 80%. I'd like to improve that. We handle our cases in 24 EU languages, largely thanks to the wonderful multilingual capacities of my staff and my colleagues in the office. This was a complaint that some of you may have been aware of. This emerged, or it was resolved just before Christmas. The issue of unfair tax, or the allegations about unfair tax advantages for 4 Spanish football clubs, had nothing to do with the Ombudsman as such. What had to do with the Ombudsman was the delay by the Commission in deciding whether or not to open up an investigation into this allegation. Normally, this sort of investigation or a decision to investigate an alleged infringement would take about 12 months. In this case, 4 years had passed. So the Ombudsman, myself, my predecessor, had proposed a friendly solution last year, which the Commission had agreed to, didn't follow through. So in early December, I again called on the Commission to act on the complaint. I also suggested that the lengthy delay in making their mind up as to whether or not to open this case allowed the appearance of a conflict of interest to emerge, as the relevant commissioner was Spanish, and I think had been involved in the creation of some of these tax changes when he was in government in Spain some years ago. I'm not saying there was a conflict of interest, but the appearance was there, and in order to engender and to sustain and maintain public trust in the EU institutions, which the political leaders constantly talk about, you have to avoid that. So the Commission opened infringement proceedings in December 2013 following on my recommendation. This was a case that was dealt with some years ago by my predecessor, Professor Diamandouros. This arose from the fine imposed by the Commission on Intel. I think that was an antitrust proceeding. They complained about procedural errors during the antitrust investigation, and what was critical, and what was the piece that my predecessor in the office was looking at, was that no minutes of a key meeting that had taken place with the computer manufacturer Dell, clearly a company rival of Intel's, were there. So my role, or the role of my predecessor, was to see whether in fact that was the case, and then the Commission was criticised, and as a result of that, as I understand it, the Commission has improved procedures in terms of minute keeping. I know sometimes when very sensitive issues are being discussed, it can be human nature not to put anything to paper because of transparency and FOI, but that just simply amounts to maladministration. And there has to be a record kept of all key decisions and key negotiations. Decisions can be made subsequently as to whether there are risks involved in releasing them, but the paper trail or the computer trail or the email trail or whatever the heck it is has to be there. That court case, as you know, is still ongoing. And this is a complaint about the use of EU languages. The Commission conducts public consultations for companies and others to participate in EU decision making, which is very good. It's openness, it's transparency, it's involving the public and the citizen, which the Commission clearly is committed to doing and does very well at times. But a lot of these consultations are frequently in English. And I suppose there is an assumption that it has become the default language, but not everybody speaks it, obviously, and it is a barrier to understanding and to really full participation if those consultations are offered in English only. So there has been a lot of negotiation between my office and the Commission in relation to that. We have called for at least summaries to be there in all of the 24 EU language. And you can see that that is a work in progress. Pleading a lack of resources, we do hear that obviously from a lot of smaller agencies, but this is the big Commission, and obviously if a consultation is to be real and really if it to be meaningful, then it has to be available in some shape or form in all of the official language, or certainly to those people who want it. This was a case that was finalised again late last year. A number of NGOs had complained about the composition of the stakeholder group attached to the European Banking Authority, which supervises the EU banking sector. The complaint was that the stakeholder group was imbalanced. It turned out that a lot of the shall we say, the industry part, arguably the more prestigious part of the stakeholder group, most of them were coming from the older democracies from Western Europe, and particularly from the UK, where the EBA, I think, is actually based. There were too many representatives from the old member state banking industry. Not enough women. We had very good consultation with them. They argued in relation to where they actually got the applications from, but even bearing that in mind, it was still imbalanced. They agreed with that. There is now a new stakeholder group in place, and we have asked them to show us how it is more balanced in line with the recommendations that we made, and indeed the commitment that they made to us. These are other examples of companies who turn to the Ombudsman for help. The Commission explaining why they were not chosen for EU contracts, obviously very important. The EU institutions released certain documents. The EU Commission settled late payments in the payment of EU projects. They waived unfair recovery orders. Yeah, and this was an interesting one. The Commission reviews its early warning systems in which companies can be blacklisted. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it would be nice if they told the companies that they had been blacklisted and why they had been blacklisted, and presumably how to get off the blacklist if they so desired. So that was a very simple transparency piece which they have now agreed to do. And again, it goes back to the reasons as to why, you know, we have an ombudsman alongside a court. The ombudsman looks at more than just the legality of matters. It looks at just simple fairness and reasonableness, and makes sure that people are dealt with under the principles of good administration, and not always simply because a law or a regulation is binding or not binding on it. In other cases, the EU institutions have explained their decision making. So that's a general flavour of what the office does. In my meetings, obviously I've only been in office since the beginning of October. I'm trying to meet as many groupings as possible who represent particular citizen and business interests within the EU. I'm asking them to help me to scan the horizon so that I can best use the resources and the skills of my office to focus on issues that have maximum public interest and public impact. Obviously, we will deal with all complaints that come to us, but I've talked about, I think we have an ethical obligation as a small office to get to make maximum impact, and I would call on any of you who have cases or systemic issues which fit within the remit and which are doable. I can't do everything or promise everything, and wouldn't want to come and talk to me. So thank you for that. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, we have a very good overview of what the Ombudsman Office has been up to, and how businesses can be helped with maladministration, access to documents, late payments. Now we have about an hour left till 5 p.m. I'd really like to hear from you. Any kind of questions you have, comments you want to make. Just as a small comment from me, we've heard a lot about problems with the institutions, and let's say businesses being overwhelmed by rules, and also lack of funding coming from banks. But what kind of problems that you might think the EU businesses are facing, and what kind of solutions do you think could be offered? We've heard about vocational training. Germany is, or at least Bavaria, is seen as a model for that. We've also heard about getting having the institutions practice what they preach. They may say they're doing all these important things to help small businesses, but then when it comes down to it, they don't apply their own theories and practices. They, for instance, with impact assessments, you don't have an impact assessment for small businesses. So I'm opening the floor up to you for any kind of questions, and please note that this seminar is web streamed, and also the hashtag is EO Business if you want to send out any tweets. And also just identify yourself, just to remind you, please identify yourself before you make any comments. So just open up the floor. Anyone has any comments? Yeah, right there.
Somebody has to try. Somebody has to try first. So, my name is Alexander Berlin. I'm a former civil servant of the Commission, and I was in charge of public health. I have two different questions. One related to SMEs, and one related to vocational training. In fact, at the time when I was in charge of public health, we were asked, it was about the first time more or less, to try to make health impact assessments and also SMEs impact assessments. However, we were not given any tools on how to do it. We were said to do it. So so I imagine each Directorate General, because we didn't, nobody told us, and we had to try to imagine how we would do it. So probably there was a totally random system on how this would be done. Have SMEs developed has the Commission asked to work with SMEs to develop a much more rational way of really assessing it? Because in the health field, it's the same problem. There's not that simple. In the environment, there had been some reasonably, I would say, coherent approaches. So that was my question regarding SMEs and having a clear model for impact assessments. Regarding vocational training, I really appreciate very much what is the model that is not only in Germany but also in Austria, which is very similar. And my question is a dual one. Has the model which is used in Germany, which is functioning very well in Germany, is it functioning as well in Austria? One thing. And second, though, there's a totally different problem. It's a problem of perception. In many countries, I was educated in France. In many countries, like in France, vocational training is looked at, is down looked at, in fact, as a second best. It's not really, if you don't succeed in classical or formal, much more formal type, you do educational training, which is a very bad system, because otherwise it does in fact really reduce the value of vocational training. Have you succeeded in Germany at having these various educational systems more or less considered at the same value and level?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. Thank you very much. We're going to start out with the first one on SMEs. Perhaps we can hear from Luc exactly what he thinks about the impact assessments.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. I hope that your question does not go back to the time of the fiche d'impact instead of the...
Well, but it started there.
It started there. So indeed, most of the people here do not know what the fiche d'impact are, but already 20 years ago there was a kind of rule that for every proposal of the Commission, the responsible civil servant should put on one paper what the impact could be for small and medium-sized enterprises. And if you looked at those fiches d'impact, normally there was nothing on it, simply one word, no impact or little impact or we do not know. And starting from this, I think also Eurochambres and the business organization started a campaign to have better impact assessments, not in the interest alone of the businesses, because we think that good regulation and good legislation is in the interest of everybody, the res publica, as Mr. Ferber has rightly mentioned. And whenever public authorities should be able to take, and politicians should be able to take a decision on the basis of the costs and the benefits of a proposal they are making. What are the benefits of it? And what are the costs for the enterprises, for other stakeholders, for the environment, and so on. And this is the basis. And of course, this is not easy, especially because small and medium-sized enterprise organizations, we do not have the means to give those data. For big enterprises, it's easier. If you need to have the impact of a certain change in the production process, they call the head office and they can give you the data. For a small and medium-sized enterprise, it's different. Because first of all, you have, especially in lawmaking, you have first of all to explain what you want to achieve. And this you can only in a direct way. And then this entrepreneur should think, oh, what are the possible consequences? So it's, we agree on this, it's not very easy, but already more than 10 years ago we developed a list of how ideal impact assessment should look like, and there should look like. And there we insisted on the fact that this should be paid by the public authorities, and ideally this would be based on face-to-face interviews. Of course, we know this is quite expensive. But in the course of the times, the Commission has developed some guidelines on it, which are also not very ideal. By the way, they are going to review it, and we will certainly take part in this consultation. But the problem is always a little bit also what, first of all, on the SMEs. We have also always insisted on more specific impact assessment towards small enterprises. In those impact assessments, often, how do you call it, the enterprise panels were used, where the Commission is using a fixed number of enterprises who have to reply on certain questions, but often the legislation that they are asked about is not of any relevance for them. So also this system is not very well working. And then you have the impact assessment as such, where, and there in the time we developed together with Eurochambres a position paper on it, on how to improve it. And we insisted on more neutral and objective impact assessment, because now it's only people from the Commission who are involved, and if I remember well, even the Court of made a remark on it that those impact assessments should be more neutral and more objective. So something is moving, and we are fully aware, once again, that it's a very difficult issue. But even if they are produced, I mean, if you look at them, and Arnaldo mentioned already some of those impact assessments, they are not always serious. I remember one, also when you make an evaluation of the consultation process, because this is also something that could be improved, that the different stakeholders could be able to comment on the impact assessments. And there the Commission is always a little bit reluctant, because then they think that we would like to influence it. No, it's not about influencing it. It's about to give, sometimes a better, we have often, not only we, but other stakeholders, a better understanding of what the result is of such an impact assessment. So a better involvement of the different stakeholders would also be better. But it has a cost, and also the Parliament, because often there are some amendments which do not take into account the consequences for especially SMEs, and also the Parliament could do better on those impact assessment. But we are hopeful, and with this review of the guidelines on impact assessments, we hope that the situation will improve. Is it not an answer?
It's a very complete
No, can I maybe just say one very, I would say, comment? I'm very glad that I raised the question, because really 25 years ago I had the problem, but I see it's not yet solved.
No.
Just want to introduce the question about vocational training, just to reiterate that many businesses, small businesses, cannot find workers. There are some businesses I know of, personally, they have vacancies open for 6 months, 9 months, even a year. They can't find the right workers. So something is fundamentally wrong when you have unemployment rates above 50% for young people, and then you have people who cannot find the right workers. So there's a complete mismatch between what the companies need and what is being produced by the educational system. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how that can be improved.
Yeah, thank you very much, but only giving some remarks on the impact assessment. I think as we are running out of this term, as Ms. O'Reilly said, And after the European elections, there has to be an agreement with the new elected Commission. I think that will be one of the key points. And the first thing is not to improve impact assessment, but to improve the quality of legislation as a whole and to reduce the number of proposals. And I think that would be the best assessment. And then you need less impact assessment. But that is only a personal remark. Thank you very much for the question on vocational training. Looking to the figures of youth unemployment, we have 3 member states who are always top 3, which is Luxembourg, Austria and Germany in various composition. And of course, Bavarian has to add South Tyrol. Yeah, South Tyrol has the same system in difference to Italy. So that are those top 3 in lowest rates of youth unemployment rates. Youth unemployment rates, yeah, that's the right wording. What we are doing for the moment, and that is very interesting, that companies from Spain and Greece especially, those 2 countries, are trying to understand our system, because I know our system is always blamed as a state-driven educational system, which is only half of the truth. So it's a education which is in schools for 1 day or 2 days a week, and in the company for the rest of the week time. So practice in the company, theory at school. The plans are not done by the state. The plans, what the people have to learn, is developed between the companies itself. It's very interesting.
From what age?
That is after the limit of schools, which starts with 15 earliest. Normally 16, 17, but 15 is the earliest chance when you have fulfilled your school age, which is 9 classes in Germany. That is the minimum one has to do. And though it's not a state-driven system by the skills in the education, that is developed by the market itself, and I think that is solving one of the problems. If a labor market is not functioning, whether offer and demand really fits or not, sometimes it's a problem of the offer as well. Yeah. What we are doing now is to establish at special companies this system. For example, you can imagine car industry is on high importance in Germany. That is not a SME-linked industry in Germany. But all those suppliers in the car industry are all over Europe. And the car industry, for example, tries to bring vocational training to all the suppliers in all member states of the European Union, because that will improve quality, is improving the possibilities of quick reaction according to market demands. And that are those things we are going to develop. And the other thing is companies who have branches in various member states try to develop vocational training for the whole people, not only for those in Germany. And the third thing is that 3 organizations which have a lot of experience, for example, with the European Social Fund, ESF, are developing systems of vocational training, especially in Greece and in Spain. And the first results we saw from that are very hopeful, and I think that is a good chance that these things are developed on a bottom-up approach and not by a top-down, because it will never function if European Union makes a law or with all the impact assessment or if a member state is obliged to do it now, because you can't switch it on and then the next day it's functioning. I think you have to create this way of development as we have for the moment, and I think that is can become a success story, especially for young people to have a chance. But on the other hand, you need SMEs, which are SMEs and not only family companies. Sorry for saying that very clearly, because they will never have one trainee in vocational training, as there's no chance to deliver all these things. So for the first step could be, as we call it, überbetriebliche Ausbildung, centers of experience where these young people can do their practice training if no company is available. But because at the end those people are asked for, and not only by SMEs but as well as in the industry. And that is an experience from Germany as well. Most of our young people are educated in vocational training by SMEs and not by the industry, but the industry is asking for those people after they have been trained. And I think industry has to deliver something as well for the young people, not only to ask SMEs to deliver.
Thank you very much. So it's unlikely we'll find a EU regulation for vocational training making a difference. I'd like to ask I'd like to ask the panel something about what could help businesses, and that's research and development, access to technology. This is something that Luke Hendricks raised. The Lisbon goal, if people remember that, was 3% of GDP. This was repeated by the European Council back in 2010. Unfortunately, we only have 2 EU member states that have actually met that goal of 3%, and it's the Nordic countries, Finland and Sweden. So I'd like to ask, what can EU governments do? We're talking a lot about sort of negative things that businesses complain about, late payments and things like that, but there could be some positive things on research and development. So from our 2 panelists, perhaps Mr. Abruzzini can start out.
Yes, I would like to start with 2 comments on the previous topics, because I think that they are very interesting. On vocational training, the attempts that are now in progress in Greece and Spain, in which we are very much involved because of the role the Chambers of Commerce play in Germany and Austria in the vocational training environment, they have little chance to succeed because the cultural approach in those countries is totally different. You had mentioned that it is a market-driven approach in Germany. So you fulfill or you try to comply with the request coming from the business community. Now, in those countries, and I can add also a large number of other member states, vocational training is not made on the basis of the output desired by the market or by the business, but by the input trainers are able to deliver. And that is the major shift that we need to provoke in member states. And that could be done with a simple instrument we are very much advocating at European level, which is a skills forecast. Skill forecast. In Germany exists, based on the skill forecast expressed by the business community, therefore the courses are organized. And that is what answers to the request of the market needs. On the impact assessment, I have another comment, and the comment is what we have repeatedly tried to introduce, which is the reverse burden of proof. If you want to legiferate on something, you must demonstrate what is the impact of your proposal. And the simplistic sentence in saying data are not available should prevent you to legiferate instead of going ahead without being capable to demonstrate the impact of your proposal. And this is something that it should exist at European Commission level, but, and I'm referring to the member of the European Parliament, it should also be applied in the amendment that the members of the Parliament introduce in a proposal of legislation from the European Commission. Because now the case is very paradoxical, where everybody is asking an impact assessment to the original proposal of the Commission, but then that proposal, due to the co-decision process, arrives in the Parliament introduces a certain number of amendments in which there is no impact assessment. Nobody knows exactly what is the impact of those amendments. And even worse, when you arrive to the trialogue, so the European Council comes into the game, they completely make a different, well, not even amendment, but decision, and where is the impact assessment of all this? So we have also asked a halt for any proposal that does not carry on a proper impact assessment with data available or served on the market that will be beneficiaries or influenced by that piece of legislation. So coming to your question, research and development. I'm not particularly keen with targets. I do not really believe that in an environment like Europe, targets mean so much. And I want to give a short analysis of the market. We have said that the small business environment detains the majority of the business interests in Europe, not only in terms of number of businesses, but also in terms of GDP, in terms of employment, in terms of innovation as well. Now, somebody has to explain to me why, if that is the setting, in the decision on the strategic investment in research and innovation, which practically is translated into a program which is called Horizon 2020, the bulk of the money does not go to the small business, but it goes to certain specific sectoral large businesses that dominate the European scenario. And we had troubles in lobbying to curb a small business instrument among that large basket that detains less than 5% of the entire money. Now, this is something, and I go back to the confidence issue. How we can be confident? That means that somebody has been so clever to lobby that decisions or legislators or those that have decided on this have decided to allocate money to those that already have the money and already receive enough resources, and not to those that desperately need those resources. And despite that lack of resources, the small businesses are those that deliver. Employment. The large businesses, since decades, they lose labor forces. Since decades. And the small businesses are those that produce new jobs. But when we go to supportive schemes, the supportive schemes for small businesses are peanuts. We always claim that research and development is key for Europe, also because we are challenged by foreign markets. But when we go to analyzing the markets and the dynamics between the domestic and the foreign markets, the large support that Europe is able to provide to businesses to access foreign markets, it is not for small businesses. Coherence is lacking. And everybody is happy because now we have a couple of billion for internationalization processes in a program which is called COSME for small business, and 5 billion for an SME instrument in Horizon 2020 for innovation and research. But no one says that on the other side there are 134 billion for international activities and 70 billion for somebody else which is not SMEs, for research and innovation. Coherence is not there.
So I'll give an opportunity for the panelists to decide to comment on this. But any questions first from the audience? If anyone has some comments or questions about this seeming disconnect where we have talking about more and more research and investment, and then when it really affects the companies that matter, the money is not there. Any questions on that? Okay, I'll move on to Luke if he has comments about that. I think you should.
Yes and no, because I also wanted to come back on what you said in the beginning after my intervention, that we blamed a lot the Commission and the European Parliament. I don't think so, because I think that a lot has happened and been achieved in this last term of the European Parliament and the Commission. Of course, everything can be improved. And also concerning access to finance, we have, as been said, now 2 programs, COSME and Horizon 2020. Well, they have to be correctly implemented in the coming months, so that also the implementation at national and regional level will be possible, so that money can go to the small and medium-sized enterprises. And of course, what Mr. Abruzzini has said is correct, but at least we achieved to have an SME instrument in the Horizon 2020 program, and quite a good one, which takes into account our demands, because it deals with the whole innovation process, from the feasibility phase to the application in the small and medium-sized enterprises. But also it does not only deal with or does not focus on top-down research, but it also includes market and societal innovation. And this is quite important, and this is something that we have achieved, that the definition of innovation is a wide definition, because in other programs it was always high-tech innovation is equal to high-tech innovation, while now with market and societal innovation this is typically something that is applicable or typical for small and medium-sized enterprises, because as I said before, SMEs have to innovate every day in order to remain competitive, but it's not high-tech, or it's not always high-tech, because there are also a lot of small enterprises who are really bringing high-tech innovation, but it's also about societal innovation, it's also about market innovation, and it's also about implied innovation.
Yes, Mr. Ferber, you wanted a comment about it?
Yeah, only to give 2 short comments. Firstly, of course, one can say that the legislation on European level has to have at any stage an impact assessment. And if I would be the Commission, I would argue like that, because Commission is asked for impact assessment, Council and Parliament is not. But we are the legislators. But that is a very important question, because at the end of the day one could then say we are not living in a democracy, but we are living in a kind of good administration, a good governance structure, and that's enough. But be assured that in this way of organization of European Union, because only those who have an impact assessment are allowed to do legislation, and sorry for being provocative on that, means that a democratic approach will never happen, which means no public discussion, which means no possibilities to take influence. So the Ombudsman has a lot of work to do then, of course, but that is not the system I would like to have at the end of the day. So impact assessment is okay for a proposal by the Commission, and having had a lot of trilogues and complicated legislations in the last years here in the European Parliament, of course Commission can defend its proposal by mentioning the impact assessment they did. But the legislator is the Council and the Parliament, and this right has to be safeguarded. And we will not make an impact assessment on any amendment one MEP is bringing in, because then you make this whole system ridiculous. The other thing, research, I think that is very important. Research and innovations. Looking into Horizon 2020, the first research program I worked for here in the European Parliament was the 4th framework program, so it's a few years ago. Horizon 2020 is the 8th, if I count it properly. We have always increased the amounts which are foreseen or earmarked for SMEs. And of course we had an increase in research money for SMEs, but it's only 10% of that what has been foreseen. And why is that? I think there are two problems. Problem number one, it's easier for the administration, Commission, to work on large programs because you have the same amount of workload by spending 10 million in the research program or by spending 20,000 euros. The same amount of workload. So of course it's easier to spend high amounts because you have the same workload if you have then to have hundreds of small amounts where you have 100 times workload. Second problem, those innovative SMEs are so struggled by their work that they don't have the time to write the calls. And what I really don't like, being a member of the Parliament, that at the end of the day only consultancies do this kind of business by writing proposals for the SMEs and getting most of the money then for the consultancy work. That is not what research money is foreseen for. And to be honest, most of the innovations we are using in our daily life have not been developed by the large industry. They have been developed by SMEs. And so therefore we really have to find solutions on that, and that means what we have established with the 7th framework program to have an independent body who is able to give money even for SMEs to strengthen that way, and to have another way for SMEs to have access to this money than this classical procedure by calls for papers and then a 2 years procedure where it is developed who will get the money and who will not get the money. That is not SME friendly because of the product on the market or even the renewed product of that what they have asked for, though that has to be established in the European research programs. Otherwise it makes no sense to ask SMEs to participate in that and then to say only that's for the large ones and for the SMEs member states have to deliver. Maybe that is a chance as well, but as we are doing that for the moment, that is, we are not financing SMEs, we are financing consultancies.
Quick comment, yeah. Quick comment from Mr. Hendricks.
If you may, Chair, I would like to react on what Mr. Ferber had said concerning impact assessment, that this would, I don't remember exactly, but it's not really democratic. I think that we have a wrong view on what correct and good impact assessments are or should be. Normally, an impact assessment is analyzing the different ways a problem can be solved. When the Commission comes up with a proposal, then normally you have different political options, and the aim of an impact assessment is to look what are the costs and the benefits of each proposal. So I do not really see how it can reduce public discussion. On the contrary, I think it's food for discussion, and it should be neutral, because I forgot to mention this, we are not eager to deliver those data. because we do not want to influence the data and the outcome of this cost and benefit exercise. It should allow politicians to be able to say, okay, with this political option, this will cost that much for those stakeholders, and these are the benefits for society as a whole. So this is what it is about. And I was always defending the fact that only the Commission should do this impact assessment, because indeed there are normally not hundreds of solutions for a problem. There are only 3, 4 or 5. And normally if the Commission would do a correct impact assessment, then normally also the Parliament should have enough ammunition or enough options. But I was naive in this, and sometimes the Commission comes up with very strange proposals, and then indeed the impact assessments are missing. To give you only one example concerning the data protection proposal, I mean, what there is now in the Parliament is really not think small first approach. On the contrary, this is very detrimental towards all small and medium-sized enterprises, because exactly there an impact assessment is missing.
Well, we could certainly have a whole afternoon on the data protection regulation. I want to give
only a short remark, as I followed very closely the negotiations with the Commission, which Parliament and the Commission did on an interinstitutional agreement on better legislation. And there the Commission raised the issue that they are obliged to deliver an impact assessment. Parliament is not. So better legislation would mean, in the opinion of the Commission, to follow the Commission proposal as there is an impact assessment, and they have already done all the studies, as you said, though they found already the best solution, so why to change it? Yeah, sorry, that was the starting point of the negotiations with the Commission, and that is what I said is unacceptable for me, because that is not the way of how the proceedings on legislation should happen. And then Commission said, okay, then for every amendment Parliament is, or one MEP is bringing in the negotiations in the various committees, an impact assessment has to be added, which is unacceptable as well. So that's why I raised this issue, as we followed very closely these negotiations. At the end we agreed on an acceptable approach. And of course the quality of the impact assessments has to be improved, but I think that's not the key issue. The key issue is, if you have the question on SME and consumer protection, for example, what is higher? How a lottery, a small or medium-sized butcher in European Union has to work in comparison to consumer protection? Is there a difference whether a sausage is sold on a local level or a regional level, a national level or a cross-border level? A very interesting question. And even the SMEs in my constituency said there is no difference for the sausage, though we accept strong rules which in the past have only been set up for cross-border business. Only to give you one example, and I can add a lot in environment and consumer protection, especially in those two areas where even SMEs ask for a clear European rule and not for an exemption for SMEs. And I think that is very important to take into account, that not all legislation which goes into all details is SME unfriendly, as SMEs can take advantage out of that as well.
It reminds me that we should never really ask how sausages are made. I want to open the debate up to the floor. If people have any comments or questions about what was said about impact assessments. I'm also going to put out a question to the panel. I know Luke wants to make a quick comment, but one of the things we hear a lot from businesses is the burden of taxation, the burden on hiring people. A lot of companies simply don't hire workers because they know that if they have to fire them eventually, that will cost them a lot of money. There's also very heavy social costs for employment in Europe. Just to give you a statistic, the OECD, which represents the most industrialized countries in the world, calculates that the 10 countries with the highest burden on taxes on workers' income, they're in Europe, 10. And with Europe, with Belgium leading. So right here in Belgium we have 56%. So just put that out to the panel about how could, if we're looking forward to improving, jump-starting the economy, making it even more competitive, perhaps governments can look at reducing these kind of charges. I know that in France right now, this is a big debate, how to reduce this heavy burden on companies. Of course, the quid pro quo is if you reduce those kind of charges on businesses, then there should be a commensurate increase in hiring. So how could that happen in other member states? Just to let Luc respond a little bit on, you had some quick comments about the impact assessments, perhaps. Or did you have, Mr. Ambrosi, did you want to go ahead and talk about the impact of heavy taxation?
Well, an easy answer to that coming from the business community would be, yes, of course, please decrease the burdens on or the taxation on labor, which is very much, hitting the business community. But because that money, as you have pointed out, will then be levied somewhere else, I think that the real discussion it is again on the efficiency of, I would say, the public sector at large, the government choices. We know that our government, our countries, they need a certain amount of money to pay for the running of the country at large, not only for the employee side, but the entire public sector. Now, we see that there are countries that are part of that list of OECD in Europe, but they are among the most competitive countries in the world. So levying taxes from business and citizens, where those taxes are used efficiently to deliver services back to citizens and businesses, that is not necessarily something which is not acceptable, even from the business side. And that has very much to do with our social model. Our social model has an associated cost, but we all know that as individuals, as citizens, as a part of this society, we want to keep that social model because it is an achievement that we do not want to give up so easily. But the problem is that in many of the European countries, and some of those that are in that list, that levy taxes from labor or from business, so direct, indirect taxes, whatever, they make not an efficient use of that money. It is like in a business. If you have a paid-in capital in a business, but your administrator do not use that money wisely, you go bankrupt. And this is what is happening to our member states. But they have certain tools to prevent bankrupt, but we always go back to the capacity to efficiently use the money. And I want to make a comment to what has been mentioned before about Germany. Certainly Germany has invested an enormous amount of money in restructuring the way Germany is working. And this is since, I would say, 2 decades at least. But that has paid off, because those investments were investment, not cost. And for those that are familiar with business terminology, if you make an investment, you expect a return on investment. If you have a cost, you just paid out a cost. This is what our member states should understand that we, from the business community, we can even accept a level of taxation which is high, provided that you get the services related to that amount of money. This is what it is not happening. Why in the education field, in the health sector, in the pension sector, our money is not well used. That is the real point for business, not how much you pay. Because then, if you want to compare only on percentages of taxation, that it is not what business really do. Because otherwise, every single business will fly away from those 10 countries, which is not the case. So the discussion is on efficient use of the public money. This is the real turnabout. And this is why I'm really underlining the need of proper reform of the public sector, because that is what we need in Europe today.
We have just about 10-15 minutes left. Just checking if there's any questions from the audience. We have one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh. Who's it? Me? Sorry. No, I have a totally different question, not follow up to what was said before, but on the basis of the discussion that you had in relation to research and let's say trying to get the SMEs a little bit outside the European Union. As you know, for the last 10 years there has been a development and an effort made by the European Commission to really project export markets. And they have set up a number of delegations outside the European Union, in particular in the G8 countries, so-called equivalent of trade offices, to try to promote European businesses in third countries. One very good example of it is in Canada, where recently, as you know, last year, the Prime Minister of Canada and President Barroso initialed the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with Canada, which provides two key elements, a movement of people also, and at the same time investment, including participation in public procurements in the third country. So my question to the people involved with SMEs, to what extent can the SMEs organization to promote essentially, let's say, small businesses, because small businesses will have difficulties to access these markets without any support. Is there any effort made by SMEs, by the SME organizations in countries such as, well, a good example is Canada right now because they do have that agreement, to really go out and to help the European Commission delegations, maybe by providing some support in one way or another with staff or otherwise, to promote the possible, let's say, participation of SMEs in this type of activities? Because that is maybe one way to go a little bit further. Thank you.
We're going to just, I'll answer there's one question there, and then we could group them together. If anyone else has any questions, please ask them. But first, the woman right there.
Thank you, Chairman. Mairead McGuinness, Member of Parliament from Ireland, and apologies, I only arrived to hear the end of Marcus, my colleague's presentation. Just perhaps a controversial question. Your presentation is very clear, by the way, particularly the last page, so thank you for it. To what extent has Germany found that some of the legislation here in Europe mitigates against your focus on SMEs? If you've already answered that, you might give me one or two key points in relation to it. And in addition, there is a new problem, I think, for many member states, energy costs. And could you comment on that, not so much even in the German context? We have big debates in Ireland about cost of energy. And this is a key issue, and perhaps the other panellists will take this point up in terms of a competitive SME and industrial sector. And just an observation comment, just to thank the Ombudsman, obviously clearly for this important event. And just, I would be interested to know how many problems arise from the SME sector and come to your desk. because I think that will be interesting so that we as politicians could understand if there are cases we could refer to you that you could help us with. Thank you.
Okay, and we just have a third question right here in the front.
Yes, hi. Thank you for your wonderful presentations already. I have more of a theoretical question about the relationship between the different institutions, Commission and European Ombudsman in particular. You mentioned, Mr. Abruzini mentioned something which was really interesting, that he said that confidence comes with willingness, and he was talking about the states. And the role of the European Ombudsman as such is to guarantee this confidence in citizens, those who legitimize the action of the European Union. You also mentioned about impact assessment. You insisted about impact assessment in your activity, so, but regarding the states. I was wondering whether or how would you consider the role of the European Ombudsman in this impact assessment and the relationship as such with this institution which actually guarantees the legitimacy of the action of the whole European Union. Thank you.
Okay. Before you answer, I just want to give the floor to the European Ombudsman, answer that question, and also give the opportunity to answer the statistical question about SMEs and complaints.
Thank you, Mairead, and congratulations on being nominated to run for your party again, your grouping again from last night, and good luck. Yeah, part of the reason why we arranged this event this afternoon is precisely to talk about the role that the EU Ombudsman plays in relation to businesses. I mean, businesses, be they small, medium or large, have as much right to come to the Ombudsman if they have a complaint against a particular institution as does anybody else, and we certainly encourage that. Last year we opened about 450 investigations, and around 30 of those came from businesses. Everything from late payments to, contractual problems, people wondering why they didn't get a particular contract. All sorts of issues arise. Late payments, as I was talking about earlier, is a particularly vexed one, particularly in times of when the economy is poor and when it can really make the difference of life or death for small companies if they are paid or not. Again, what I was saying earlier was to ask any of those bigger organisations who support or lobby or represent small or medium, any of the SMEs, that they would scan the horizon almost on my behalf and see if there are any particular areas in which the Ombudsman can make a difference in terms of looking at a systemic issue such as, for example, late payments. I mean, my strategy as Ombudsman, as you know, the office is quite small, 70 people, a lot of people out there. What I'm aiming to do is set up a dedicated unit which will actively seek out particular areas in which we can make most of a difference. So I would very much welcome any of the companies and institutions, organisations represented here to take that on board, and I'm trying to meet as many of them personally as possible. In relation to your question about the role that the Ombudsman can play in relation to some of those areas, I mean, I think, when you look at good administration and certain of the issues that I talked about earlier and that have been raised here in relation to the level of genuine consultation that is done when these issues are being decided upon, and obviously we've heard here some concern in relation to the degree to which the problems of SMEs, the attitudes of SMEs, the concerns of SMEs are taken on board. And as I said earlier, and I know you were here for that, we talked about, for example, an issue around consultations only been conducted in the English language. Another area in which there appeared to be poor governance was in relation to, the stakeholder body that was set up to advise the European Banking Authority, which is a pretty key player. in a lot of these areas, and making sure that all interests, and not just geographic interests, but other interests are represented. So those are the sort of areas in which the European Ombudsman can get involved. But what I am attempting to do is to have as much dialogue as possible, so that it's a two-way street. I'm not just saying to you what I can do, but also other people are coming to me and looking at what I do and what is needed, and where the two can find common cause.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have only a very short period of time left. In the last 5 minutes, I just would like to ask the panel to answer any of those questions that were just raised, and also give some concluding remarks. I'll start with Mr. Ambrosini, Mr. Hendricks, and Mr. Farber. And if you could limit this to just 90 seconds each. Thank you.
Could the this is you. Yes. Okay. Could the European Ombudsman look into this impact assessment issue? I think that would be very. I mean, we should find probably an angle, but it might be non-compliance with internal procedure, because there are procedures that are set and they explain how the impact assessment should be made, and they are not followed. So this might be an angle probably that for the European Ombudsman to investigate, where there is no specific or a single business that is affected, but at large this is a case where procedures are not followed or they should. So probably this might be an angle where the European Ombudsman can enter, just answering your question. And I think that I will limit my intervention here.
Very short. Also on the role of the Ombudsman, and continuing on what Mr. Abruzzini had said, maybe you could look a little bit in the evaluation of the consultation process. Because there it's still the case that there are no strict or not even rules to evaluate the different inputs from the different organizations. And if I can give you an example, a position of WAPME or Eurochambres still counts for one contribution. So this is not really serious. But if you allow me, concerning what Mr. Ferber had said on the sausages, I fully agree with him. I mean, and I feel a little bit that we have failed in bringing our message. Clear impact assessments have nothing to do with exempting small and medium-sized enterprises, because maybe you will remember that we were the only organization who clearly said no to the general proposal of the Commission to exempt micro-enterprises from future legislation, because indeed we do not think this is useful for micro-enterprises or for small enterprises as a general rule to exempt them.
And some concluding remarks, Mr. Farber.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't have a list, sorry about that, on those pieces of legislation where SMEs are mainly hurted. But I think the main problem is as more details we do on European level, as less space for maneuver companies in general have. And I think that is one of the general rules. Less legislation on European level, but that what has been agreed is fully introduced in all member states is better than to have a lot of legislation on European level which is only introduced by a few member states. And so our approach from Germany is to concentrate on those things which really have to be done on European level, and to keep the rest for national legislation, and in Germany, of course, regional and local authorities as well, as we have this hierarchy of systems. But unfortunately, we don't have a list, and that are the top fives. If you withdraw them, then everything is fine. We don't have a list like that. As the devil is always in the details.
Okay, I'll just leave the final remarks to the Ombudsman.
Thank you. Yes, I thank you very much as well for the comments in relation to the potential role of the Ombudsman. I mean, As Ombudsman, I don't do policy. I don't substitute my decisions, my thoughts in relation to matters which are more properly the business of the Parliament or the Commission. As you rightly say, a lot of what I do is procedural, but sometimes the outcome of the investigations into procedural errors or maladministration can have sometimes, a political or a legislative impact. I mean, if you look at the football case that I talked about, what I was looking at there was essentially a procedural piece. But the investigation that will happen, that is being undertaken by the Commission, will have other impacts. Obviously, equally the Intel case. That again was a transparency piece and it was a procedural piece, but it fed into a very important case with lots of implications in relation to business and law and all of that. The complaint about the use of EU languages, again, a procedural issue, a process issue, but something that is very important in relation to making sure that all voices are heard in all of these very important discussions that should go on between the citizens and the Commission and so on. Again, the composition of the stakeholder group, what I was looking at there was the procedures that were supposed to have been followed, so it was a procedural issue, but the outcome of that is a far more balanced, hopefully, stakeholder group, which will feed into the good governance and the ability of civil society at all levels and properly, in a very balanced way, to feed into these very important discussions. So thank you.
Well, that just leaves me as chair to thank the panel, thank you, the audience. I'm getting you out of here exactly at 5. I hope you've enjoyed it, and of course, I appreciate your attention. Look forward to future debates. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.